Hello, hello, hello. I am the author and entrepreneur, the Cerebral Palsy Vigilante, Zachary Fennell. And today I once again have the joy and privilege to welcome Daryl Perry of Your Level Fitness on to, I guess, resume a conversation that we had earlier on my channel.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we talk about a lot of things, and after each conversation, we're like, oh, hey, we talked about this. This could be a video on its own, or a podcast episode on its own, and that's what we're doing today. And if you guys are watching, we are playing tricks on you because in the last video, I had the thicker beard, and now Zach has the thicker beard. So you never know which side of the screen each of us are going to be on, and you don't know what the facial hair setup is going to be either.
Yes, yes, that's funny. But yeah, so what if so anyone who missed my last video with Daryl here on my channel, we were discussing odd comments we received, living with cerebral palsy, or you hear living with cerebral palsy, and that, came to a greater conversation about feedback. But as far as like odd comments go, one of the ones I mentioned was, I'm a marathoner. I learned to work with my cerebral palsy to become a marathoner. And I had done a podcast interview with someone, and they created this thumbnail that was defeating cerebral palsy like a boss or something. And it came to that discussion point of I'm not defeating cerebral palsy. I still have cerebral palsy. I'm learning to work with my cerebral palsy. I'm working with my cerebral palsy. And before we go any further into, 'cause you're going to hear that phrase a lot as we uh, have our discussion today, I want to first, Daryl, what does that phrase working with your cerebral palsy, what does that mean to you?
I think that's actually the only way that we get one of the primary things that all of us with CP want, which is we want to live as independent as possible, as long as possible. And I think we reach a point because I mean, look, we navigate life with this from the very beginning. And I've talked to so many people that are active, and it's like I can force my body to do things and will it to finish things, and you feel really good about it until the chronic injuries start setting in and you have to look at things differently. So to me, working with your cerebral palsy, my cerebral palsy, is just about preserving my body and my quality of life for as long as I possibly can.
Excellent. So let's dive into some details. Can you give an example or two of how you work with your CP?
Yes. So and this has actually been very recently. Um, I started after my workouts, doing sitting in a hot tub of water for like 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes I would put Epsom salt in, and what really and I'll you know what I'll go even further back. When I was dealing with some ankle injuries because I had overdone it with my body yet again, I was trying to push things, and wasn't all that dramatic. I was just trying to be as active as I could, but I wasn't taking care of myself properly. But I was in such a state that I couldn't stand to shower, so I started taking baths. And what I had noticed is after my bath, my body felt more relaxed. The vast majority of the pain I have is in the lower half of my body, but consequently, if everything is tight, that goes up into my back, and it can go all the way up. But I started researching this a little bit, and it's basically resetting my neurological system. And the way it described it is that my legs are partially contracted most of the time. And what it said that this does, even for just 5 minutes and warm to hot water, is it resets my nervous system. And it's all been trial and error, but I got to tell you, as somebody I still stretch first thing in the morning, but getting in the tub for 5 to 10 minutes after I exercise, and then getting in the tub 5 to 10 minutes before as part of like a wind down routine at the end of the night, I have for the last couple of weeks, I haven't had anywhere near the amount of muscle stiffness or soreness in the morning or post workout. And it's listening to your body, which I think we all hear. It's really hard to do, because a lot of the times when we're listening to our body, it's going to be really small nuance changes. But yeah, this has been. I don't want to sound overly dramatic, although I know we're putting this out on the internet, so you got to be a little dramatic. But I mean, this is probably the best that I've felt in a very long time in my body. So it's been good.
That's great. And that is a great thing to hear, because you often hear about people discussing aging with cerebral palsy, and just, because premature aging brings on a set of issues that we often have with CP. And then so instead of feeling like you're in your early 40s, I believe, and that is, to feel like, hey, I feel good, versus being like, oh man, if it just wasn't for the cerebral palsy, I would I'd be able to do this or do that. And I think that, to me, kind of gets into the idea of working with cerebral palsy is a part of the mindset. The example you gave is a great physical example, but I also think taking the time to take a step back, for me, that if you're watching this, and you're the vast majority of your movements is in like one or two fingers, and you use electric wheel, like a motorized wheelchair, and you have a care giver who helps you out with everything, just it doesn't mean that you won't be able to relate with working with your CP. For me, example of listening to your body is like, the older I get, I'm in my late 30s right now. The older I get, like, you start experiencing some more like pain, especially during the winter when the weather's colder. At any time the weather changes, and in the Ohio area where we both are, that happens. But so for me, I'll be using a heating pad, and keypad's also an opportunity. Sometimes I'll just be on my tablet watching YouTube videos. Other times I'll sit there for 10, 15 minutes with the eating pad. And it's an opportunity for me to just sit and reflect on where things are, where I am in my life, what's good, what I would like to see more improvement on. So it's, even to me, I think working with your CP doesn't just have to be physical. It's about finding opportunities, or that's 10, 15 minutes I'm sitting down with my heating pad. If I didn't need to use the heating pad, I might just, like, boom, 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 moving on to the next thing, instead of giving myself some time for self-reflection.
I think that's very important, and I think for the I feel like because I'm not sure what kind of sensations you get when you're overwhelmed, but I do feel like a lot of when I'm overstimulated. I can think of the last time I was in an airport walking through, and it was like a huge crowd, and everything was just real. I was, of course, I had the CP sweats going on. Everybody knows what that is. And like I was at the wrong gate. I was able to get to where I needed to go, but like I was starting to get a little nervous or a little anxious. And when I feel overstimulated, like I feel it throughout my entire body. So taking time to do the things like what you're talking about, just sitting there and collecting your thoughts, or just slowing down, I think is really important for us to consider and for us to do as well.
And then like another example of it, I mean, this involves a little physical aspect of it because, for the constant need with my CP to stretch my hamstrings, like, daily basis, however it is. I describe in one of my books that I describe myself as a productivity junkie. I always like to be doing something. And so just taking some time to rest is I it's not restful because inside I'm kind of like debating with my like trying to justify it to myself like it's okay to take this rest, but with you know I have a knee immobilizer and a brace I can use. I strap in and I wear them for like an hour or whatever, and it helps, and it allows me to stretch my hamstrings. That is giving me, putting those on allows, I'm working with my CP. My CP saying, hey, your hamstrings are tight, like, do something about it. And it allows me to like, lay down, put a podcast on and just relax and do it guilt free because I'm stretching, which is an important aspect to keep me at, at my best.
Yeah, I think in stretching is something we seem to come back to this a lot because we're all trying to deal with it and really figure out how to make it work. It's challenging because I'd gotten to a point where my morning routine for stretching was coming up on 30 minutes, and I was like, this is too much. Like, where can I combine these, and what are stretches that I have to do in a normal structured flow versus something I can just kind of do like you're set, like when I'm, is there something I can do where I'm like, I am stretching my hamstrings passively, like what you're talking about, or just something I can do. A big one for me is a quad stretch, something that I never really used to do. But then when I was starting to have some knee stuff going on a few months ago, I started doing it, and just that's been doing wonders for me too. So yeah, it seems like we're always trying to figure out the best way to take care of ourselves, and stretching is a very important part.
Going back a little earlier, you were talking about, recently, and we've talked about as you get older with CP,
Mhm.
so it does sound like learning to work with your CP is something that's come with age for you rather than something that's maybe always be present has always been present.
Mhm.
Do you feel that's an accurate statement? And if so, at what was a point? Is there any point where you feel like you really began to like, I need to work with my CP versus kind of, I don't know, seeing CP as the enemy because it made you different and you want it, by the, obviously for me, it's like in my, it's like CP made me different, and that, at a time growing up, I wanted to blend in and be like everyone else. So that
Yeah.
was, it was like, rather than looking to work with my CP, I was looking to hide my CP. With you, what what's your story there? Was there a particular point in time where just that you came to learn to work with your CP?
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because when you first talked about this, I went straight to the fitness stuff. But the more you were talking about that, and kind of like going back to childhood, and even as an adult wanting to fit in, I got to a point, and I think I was relatively younger. I was a teenager, I think, where I was just like, you know what, I'm not going to wish that I didn't have this. I'm not going to say if only. And before, and this is where, because, and I'll say this, and I'm not joking. So anybody that has any kind of response, you can always email me, Daryl at yourlevelfitness.com on this. But like, I just had to appreciate the situation that I was in. And some people will look at me and think, oh, well, you have mild CP, you don't really deal with there are so many more cases that are more severe than yours. Absolutely, there are. But we all have obstacles that we're navigating, and I think when we can look at this, not even just at the day-to-day task level of how to learning to work with our CP, but really from a headspace standpoint, how can I make my situation better, whatever the situation is? You were mentioning an example of somebody that would have limited use of their hands or fingers, and like there's ways to work with this, but I think before we even work with it, we have to, I'm not even going to say, I mean, coming to terms with it is part of it, but like we have to appreciate the situation that we're in. And I've said it to you in conversation before. I was my birth situation actually happened about a year before I was born with my brother. He lived 3 days. I am here. So like, we have to appreciate the situation that we have now. An instance for me physically, this past series of injuries that I had with my feet, which started as bruises to both of my ankles because I was trying to push myself too hard, and then which led to like like a cascade of lower body injuries because I would not follow doctors' recommendations 100%. I would do what I was told to do about 90% of the way. But what would happen is I would try to do my thing too fast, because what I would do in the past is, it's like 60, 70% healed, and then just go back to my normal speed. This situation didn't allow me to do that. Um, so I really had to, in order for things to heal, I had to take everything completely. Like I had to follow the instructions completely, which I did, and things initially got better. Where I'm noticing a difference is I was curious at the last time that I was really into being active above and beyond. And I was walking a lot. I was even running some. This was about 5 years ago, but I still had the same watch that I do now, the same fitness watch. So I went back and I looked at like my estimated calorie burns, and they were all over the place from one day to the next because I would work out and then I wouldn't be able to like do something or be nearly as active for the next couple of days. And I think the biggest thing with the way I'm approaching things now, because it's a workout that works best for me, that allows me to, be do cardio, build endurance, get steps in without overly taxing my body. Everything's pretty consistent now, and that's because I started to really listen to my body instead of just trying to like throw my body at whatever I wanted to do and be like, we'll pick up the pieces in the next couple of days and then we'll do, or, rest for a day or two and then do it again. So that was probably it, both from like a day-to-day life, but then of course also a fitness standpoint as well.
I know for me, when I became really big on learning to work with my CP, working alongside my CP, was when I was doing my marathon training. I did the, for anyone by chance coming across this video and they're new with me for the first time, I did the Towpath Marathon, walked the Towpath Marathon, the 26.2 miles of that in 2017 and 2018. Going into it, prior to that, I had kind of let said I'm gonna, like, initially I was like I'm gonna do a full marathon. When I found out it was 26.2 miles, my mindset went to I can't do a full marathon. I have cerebral palsy, and all the reasons that the way I walk, I'm more vulnerable to falling. So there's balance issues. With the way I walk, I get calluses. I have these calluses on my feet that would just grow worse if I, and make, moving more painful if I try to do 26.2 miles. Those are just two examples of where I was just putting the the symptom of CP, for lack of a better term, in front in that in like, okay, I cerebral palsy, I can't do it. Here's why, here's why. And instead of learning to work with my CP and getting to the point of, I did a half marathon in 2016, and I was ready to be like, okay, that's my physical peak. It was my friend James who kept insisting, when are you going to do the full marathon? When are you going to do the full marathon? And I was finally like, I'll do the full marathon if you do it with me. James surprised me. He's like, okay. I thought I was just going to shut him up, but nope. He
Yeah,
took action. He registered. He sent
yeah,
me like, and it was like, okay, game on. I'm a man of my words. I told James I'd do it if he did it with me, and so here we go. And the balance. Okay, the balance issue. So that came to learning after stubbornly debating back and forth about whether to use it. When I kept consistently falling 10 miles into my training, around 10 miles, I was just like, okay, I'm going to use my cane
yeah,
for that. I mean, it was a very internal debate situation, but I'm going to use my cane to help counterbalance. So I found a way to counterbalance. Like like how can I balance? How can I balance out my balance using an assisted device to help with that. With far as the calluses on my feet go, it was okay. I'll just have to do. I found a good consistent foot routine I was doing after I showered to help, using a pumice stone to shave down my calluses. And I know I've mentioned the pumice stone to you before, Daryl. And it was like, so like, and having this certain soap to wash my feet with that helped to keep my feet feeling fresh. So it was learning to be like, okay, here's the issue at hand. Where do I, how do I work with it? What do I need? Do I need an assistive device? Do I need to create a routine to help take better care of myself? Very similar to how you were saying, Daryl, that you were like this stretching routine is going to be too much. What changes can I make?
yeah.
And I really like in through that marathon and through that it was just like it was by making these changes, working with my CP, I accomplished something that I thought was impossible for me. I thought that I deemed unreasonable. And when you so it's just about taking that step forward, which will kind of leads into my next question for you, Daryl, is once, and you've hit on it a little bit earlier because you said you're feeling very good, and that as good as you've been for a while. Like learning to work with your CP, how has that made a difference in your overall life?
So it makes a huge difference. For one, when I'm moving about and navigating in the world, I'm making eye contact with people. If I'm in a lot of pain, I'm 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 looking at like objects around me more. Maybe I'm looking down at my feet more because I don't want to fall or because I'm struggling. Um, I feel better moving about day to day. Day-to-day tasks are easier to do, and honestly, when I feel better physically, I think my work is better as well. Now, I work in front of a computer, so you would think, oh, well, what does it matter? If you're not feeling good physically, it makes a difference. I feel like we got to feel good on the outside, we got to feel good on the inside, and that kind of goes together. So, I mean, it shows up in every area.
Oh, that I can um, surely second that. And I know for me, and this is actually part of so my marathon journey, as Daryl knows and my regular viewers know, but anyone new watching this, I wrote a memoir to document and detail it, called Slow and Cerebral. And one of the early on chapters, I talk about we can sit here and we can how important it is to listen to your body and do what you need to do, but it's another thing to actually do it. There was a time where I went like 3+ months without doing any of the exercises that I had done as a kid in physical therapy, and my body, like, I was getting like knots in my knee that I never had gotten before. I had to be picking up with my arm my right leg to get like in and out of cars and in and out of the bathtub because the range of motion, because I wasn't exercising regularly, I was like that, I was losing that range of motion, and my hamstrings were tighter because a lot of my exercises involved different kind of hamstring stretches. And so that all that was kind of made it a mess where, at this time I currently work at a public library, but at this time I was focused on freelancing as a writer. So I was spending my days behind a computer writing, and I would sit down to write, and I just, like, hamstrings would bother me and I couldn't focus. So I'd go, use my leg cast that I mentioned earlier, cast and immobilizer to passively stretch and then come back. But it was still very much, I wasn't able to show up and be my best because I wasn't taking care of myself physically. And so after that 104-day stretch or whatever it was, I was really focused because this is also when I started, like, before I could do a marathon. You were talking about starting with 5Ks and doing 3.1 miles and getting better at that.
Yep.
So this was also leading right into, 5Ks. And I knew if I didn't take care of myself physically, that, I wouldn't be able to show up at my best for those, for the shorter races, let alone doing anything bigger than that. And so that physical, taking care of yourself physically, whether it's about, you show up better everywhere in your life, whether that is in front of a computer, or if you're talking about any kind of event, you're just able to, because, like, the spasticity and the, if your body's bothering you, that takes up your, even if you're not, like, consciously realizing it, your mind, at least in my thought, I'm no doctor or anything, but your mind is subconsciously just thinking like, oh, this, my hamstrings are stiff or my back's bothering me, rather than just allowing you to be in the moment.
Um, so that's actually a really good segue. And you had said something before about how you often feel like you need to be doing something productive. Now, um, I feel much the same way. Now, I often think because I was diagnosed with this when I was a kid because I was missing benchmarks, I have felt like I was behind my entire life. So I've always feel like I have to be doing something. Now, I would be incredibly exhausted by the middle of the day. And I start my days pretty early, and I got a lot of things that I get done, especially by the end of the day. But I used to try to be really stubborn and push through. Now I will allow myself to take a nap in the middle of the day. Sometimes that's a 10-minute nap. If it's any longer than, like, if it's a longer nap, I just look at it as um, I must have needed this, right? Like my body and my mind needed this. Whereas in the past, and this is again like working along with your CP and with your body. There's so many things we don't think of, but I used to try to will myself to do anything, and I would just will myself to the point of exhaustion, to the point at the end of the day, because I wasn't taking care of my body the way that I needed to. I would be lit up, sore, and tight, and I would have trouble sleeping, which would carry on into the next day, and the cycle would repeat itself.
Yeah, and sleeping is such an important aspect to it too. The way I look at it is I see our brains as especially now that we're in a digital age and like everything is, you know, surrounds technology. You know, the brain is our CPU. It's our processing unit that gets us, you know, and sometimes you know your computer is acting up, and it's like, what do you have to do? You have to shut it down and restart it. You know,
Yep.
sleep is our shutdown. Sleep is what allows the body to get, you know, to just do what it needs to do so that you can wake up and be go after the next day, you know, well rested. You mentioned how, you know, it's like if your nap is longer than 10 minutes, you just, well, my body, you know, my body needed that. I have a very similar, you know, experience. I try to get, and this goes to consistency, which you talked about earlier, Daryl. I
Yep.
try to get 8 hours of sleep a night. Like that to me is like, I need 8 hours of sleep. When I was younger, in my 20s, I could have gotten by with, you know, teens, 20s. You know, I got by with, you know, I could do, you know, 6 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep. But now at 38, I'm at my best when I get 8 hours of sleep. And sometimes, you know, like especially lately when I'm getting productive and I start, you know, getting into something, it's like, you know, I've been getting a lot of like 7 hours sleep, 9 hours of sleep, 7 hours of sleep, you know, 6 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep, you know, and it's funny as much as it would be like, well, if you do 7 9 7 9, that, you know, that averages out to 8, but it just still doesn't feel like the same as if you're getting that consistent 8 across the board. So I try to make in, you know, conceded effort to try to been, you know, trying to get back to that 8 consistently. And this morning I was debating about whether or not to set my alarm. I'll set my alarm obviously if I have to, like for work,
Yeah.
if I'm working in the morning, but on a morning like today where I'm not working until later in the day, and this technically would be the this recording would be the first thing I had to get up for. It's like I don't need to set an alarm, and I was just like, well, what if I don't want to be waking up at 9 o'clock and getting 10 hours of sleep? But at the same time, I'm like, well, that's what my body needs. That's what my body needs. I ended up getting up like a quarter to 8, so not, you know, a little over 8 hours of sleep today, but for going into today. But it's just that, you know, consistency is so important, and I think along with consistency comes forgiving yourself for a day when, okay, like another exercise that I do and another thing I do to help counter, you know, help with my balance is I'll do a set of reverse crunches every day, and that helps strengthen my core, which helps, like there have been moments throughout the last decade plus that I've been doing my crunches every day, and I've stepped, and I've been like, you know, when I first started doing them, I remember I took a step, and I caught myself because I had a stronger core, and I thought to myself a year ago I would have fallen. So
Yep.
that, you know, doing that exercise every day is enough something that's helped me strengthen my balance a little. And there are days though that, okay, you know, I was really exhausted on, I think it was Saturday. So I ended up not doing my crunches that day. You know, and you can use that as downward momentum and be like, oh man, I missed it. And then, you know, that missed day turns into two mistakes because you're kicking yourself for not doing it the previous day. But
Mhm.
instead, I look at, okay, you know, can't make up, you know, can't go back in time and do it. You know, I was too tired to do it, whatever. You know what? Do it today and then focus. I think there is also a need to forgive yourself and show yourself grace instead of, you know, putting yourself in up into impossible standards.
I agree, and this ties into what when I was talking about appreciating your CP, like from a mindset standpoint or a thought process standpoint. I think that's why, and because everything we do, if you think about it, is a mental game. It's a mental exercise, and it's that cliche of it's not necessarily as much what happens, but how you respond to it. So, and when you're talking about that downward spiral of beating yourself up and all that, logically people know not to do that, but when you can emotionally be invested to a point and in a way to where you're like, you know what, I'll get it when I get it, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's, and it's just like what you're talking about. It's just, it's just getting back to things for the long haul, because all this stuff we're talking about, like, we're just going to continue doing it. There is no real end point. So
I know, like, and we're all human, and humans, we're not going to show up, perfect every day. So I think that's a big part of it. I know, one of the things I used to do, and I still try to do it when I can, is if I miss a day, I'll try to do, and this is like whether it's the crunches or just like I didn't make the progress I wanted on a writing project that day, the previous day. The next day, I'll try to be like, oh, I'll just do, 2 days worth today. And, I had to catch myself, and I think to myself, is you can't make up yesterday until you've done today's worth of work. And so get today's, do first things first, get whatever task you had for today done, whether that's an hour on a writing project, 2 hours on a writing project, or, doing that set of crunches. Do those first. And then if later you have the energy to do more and make up for what you didn't do yesterday, fantastic, go with it. If you don't, oh well, that's life. It's okay.
yeah, I mean, I think it's from what you're saying, I feel like that's basically you're taking ownership of your life. Like, I'm in control here, right? So, like, if I'm going to end up doing more, I can. Let's get the bare minimum done, and then if I decide to do it or not, it's my decision, which I think is pretty empowering. When we
Yeah,
talk
and I actually think that word control is really a good way for us to just start bringing this video to a close and talking about, um, going over anything we haven't discussed, or just recapping what we did. Because when you're essentially, I think what we're talking about, learning to work with your cerebral palsy, it's one of the things I learned as a marathoner. Control what you can control. It's like we could be upset that we CP and the challenges that it involves, but that doesn't benefit your situation. So you can't control the fact cerebral palsy leaves you with tighter muscles. What you can control is whether or not you stretch. You can't control that, you're that by default your balance is less, or that you fatigue faster. But what you can control is how you respond to that, whether it's forgiving yourself and taking extra rest and doing the things that you talked about today, or Daryl, or if it's along the lines of what can I do as a supplement to try to get stronger, whether like the reverse crunches, or using or even just like using a cane and having assistance, that kind of assistance is, it's about, learning to work with your cerebral palsy. I think, tell me if you agree. It's about controlling what you can control in the situation cerebral palsy creates for you.
I think that's right. I smiled before because I'm now getting to the point when I know where it's like, oh, we're probably going to wrap up soon, and then we're in sync with that. Yeah, it's controlling what you can control, but it's also for me with the physical stuff, like, because again, it used to be, well, I can control this, I can will my body to do more than it wants to do, but I think it's also controlling controlling the things that are going to help you. And I think that's what we're talking about. I think perspective matters, and that really, when it comes to like the message that you put out, the message that I put out, and other folks that we know, I'm a big believer in having an optimistic approach to this stuff. And with the way that modern technology is with the internet, I like I understand complaining. We're all human. We all do it. It gets a little dicey for me when people complain on the internet because I feel like it ends up being this firestorm of negativity that honestly at the end of the day doesn't help anybody. So control what you can control.
It's you know, I'm gonna just call attention to the overlay that people are seeing on the screen at the bottom. We got our Instagram handles in the little silhouette stretching, so make sure you check out Daryl and myself on Instagram. But we also have that ribbon in the green cerebral palsy awareness ribbon in the middle with what looks like butterfly wings coming off of it. So it's like the ribbons, like the butterfly body, and yet the wings. And I thought that was an appropriate thing to put in the overlay because I think when you learn to work with your cerebral palsy, that allows you, especially, when your goal is, as they're talking about, it's like, yeah, he could push himself this day, but if that's going to set him, give him a setback for in a month, is it worth it? Your goal is long term, being at your best long term. And so it's just that, that those wings, butterfly wings, as I feel, just it all represents that, it allows you when you learn to work with your cerebral palsy, it creates a new sense of beauty in your life and allows you to uh, evolve into your next great form. And yeah, so with that said, Daryl, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to add?
I agree with you. I think your next phase, spread those wings and fly. I'm right there with you. All
All
good.
right. And while you're flying, and well, before you go fly, and like, all right, find us on Instagram, follow us there. Uh, if you're not already, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more conversations with Daryl, with more videos for, just insightful videos from myself. Uh, make sure you're subscribed, have hit the like icon to show the world that and YouTube, you've enjoyed today's video. And until next time, don't blend in, blend out.